In the realm of RPGs, the balance between player choice and narrative control is a crucial design challenge. On one end, you have games that give players immense freedom to shape the world around them through their choices. On the other end, there are story-driven RPGs that prioritize a tightly woven narrative where player choices exist, but is somewhat constrained to maintain the integrity of the storyline. Two games that highlights these different approaches are Baldur's Gate 3 and The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. While both games are highly acclaimed, they tackle this balance in different ways. Let's explore the core differences in how these games approach player choice and narrative control, and what that means for the overall experience. Baldur's Gate 3 is built on a framework of choice-driven storytelling, rooted in its Dungeons & Dragons heritage. From the moment the game begins, every decision the player makes, from dialogue options to combat approaches, affect how characters, factions, and the world at large react to you. Major plot points, relationships, and even the fate of key characters can change based on how you roleplay your character. For example, you can choose to ally with certain factions, betray your companions, or take drastically different paths to solve quests. Entire storylines may be locked out or revealed based on these choices. This creates a deeply personal experience for each player, as no two playthroughs are ever the same. And the game's narrative is designed to accommodate a wide variety of player behaviors, even chaotic or unpredictable ones. You can kill major NPCs or skip sections of the game entirely, and the story will adjust to these actions in real time. And as in other RPGs, NPCs and party members will remember your choices and may treat you differently based on past interactions. For instance, some companions might leave your party or even turn against you if your actions conflict with their morals. And leaning on its root in D&D rules, Baldur's Gate 3 gives you the tools to roleplay any character archetype, from a noble hero to a morally grey anti-hero, or even a villain. This flexibility gives the player immense control over how the story unfolds. On the other hand, we have a game such as The Witcher 3, which is also a masterclass in storytelling. But unlike Baldur's Gate 3, its core narrative is largely fixed. You play as Geralt of Rivia, and although your choices influence the details of how the story unfolds, the overall direction and key plot points are predetermined. For example, major decisions such as whether Ciri becomes Empress or a Witcher depend on choices Geralt makes throughout the game. However, these decisions branch from fixed points in the story rather than diverging the narrative into completely new directions. The choices in The Witcher 3 are meaningful, but they tend to influence the relationships and outcomes within the existing framework. For instance, how you interact with Triss and Yennefer impact your romantic relationships, but Geralt's identity and overall journey remain largely unchanged. The Witcher 3 does, however, give players significant control in side quests, where choices can lead to unexpected outcomes, different quest resolutions, or changes in characters' fates, as in the Bloody Baron questline for example, which you can check out here on the channel. But these are often self-contained within the quests themselves, rather than altering the game's main narrative. But Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't just give players freedom for dialogue or quest choices. It begins at character creation. You can customize your race, class, background, and even personality traits, which directly affect how the world perceives and reacts to you. A drow, for example, will elicit different responses from NPCs compared to a human, and a bard's charm might open more dialogue options than what a barbarian's bluntness never could. But the barbarian might be able to threaten or perform a physical feat that the bard never could. Your game will play out differently depending on what character you have created. Every time you load up a new playthrough, you have a chance of seeing and doing something completely different, both in how the character plays mechanically, but also how it interacts with the world around it. On the other hand, The Witcher 3 roots its narrative with the predefined identity of Geralt. Although you can steer his directions, Geralt's personality remains grounded in a core set of values, a grizzled monster hunter navigating a morally grey world. This predetermined identity allows for richer writing around Geralt's relationships and worldview, but it limits how drastically you can influence his core character. For example, you can shape how Geralt responds to situations, such as his approach to dealing with monsters or deciding who to side with politically. But these decisions mostly fit in with Geralt's established identity as a Witcher with a code. Even if you steer him into morally ambiguous choices, you're still bound by the overarching lore and expectations of Geralt as a character. And I know that some of the choices in the game don't really add up to who Geralt is in the books and previous games, but it's like wildly different either. For example, you can't just go around killing random villagers because Geralt just wouldn't do that. And it is partially in these seemingly small restrictions that the biggest differences are made, because choosing to spare or kill a certain NPC in Baldur's Gate 3 may change the entire course of a faction's story or alter the relationships within your party. There's always a feeling that your choices, no matter how small, really matter in shaping the world, even if you don't know what the full impact will be until much later on. And of course, there are large scripted set-piece moments in the game, but what makes many of the story beats hit is not only the good writing, but also the personal connection that you have to the outcomes, since you've had a large influence on the moment. Though what you run the risk of is making the overall narrative weaker. Having to design so many outcomes and scenarios, it is very easy to stretch yourself too thin, making the decisions and the world feel shallow as a result. But Larian has largely been able to avoid this issue. And while The Witcher 3 offers less player-driven divergence, the choices it does offer still carry significant emotional weight. CD Projekt Red carefully crafts their key scenes, where the moments hit more like they would in a movie. The decision regarding the fate of the Bloody Baron or the choices Geralt makes concerning Ciri's future are prime examples of moments where the game gives players a sense of control, while also delivering a highly emotional resolution. These moments, while fewer in number and more curated compared to Baldur's Gate 3, resonate deeply due to the game's strong narrative design. The designers can put more into each of their moments because they know that all of the players will encounter it. But the problem you can run into when making a game in this style is making the player lose interest. If you have a more uninteractive world where the players themselves can't choose what they're going to do, you have to make sure that what is there is compelling. The Witcher does combat this by giving the player enough choice to still make it feel more personal, as well as having a very well written story. But other games, such as some of the Assassin's Creed games, at least to me, feel very impersonal and therefore lose me. And there are pros and cons to both of these styles, and that is also partially why I choose these games in particular. They have different approaches, but are some of the best executions of their respective branches. But they also do have some overlap. The Witcher still has some choice as opposed to a game like God of War that's entirely linear, and Baldur's Gate 3 still has curated parts, and I think that some sort of mix is the best, just changing how far out on a scale you are. Both Baldur's Gate 3 and The Witcher 3 excel in their own ways, but they appeal to different types of RPG players. For players who crave agency and the freedom to create their own story, Baldur's Gate 3 offers unparalleled choice, where every action can ripple out into the world and lead to diverse, player-driven narratives. For players who prefer a strong, author-driven narrative, The Witcher 3 is a masterpiece of storytelling that allows for meaningful choices within a tightly controlled and emotionally impactful story arc. Ultimately, the best RPG experience depends on what the players value more, the freedom to shape their narrative, or the immersion into a deeply crafted, emotionally rich story. Both games are a paragon of RPG design, showing that both player choice and narrative control have their place in the genre, depending on how they're implemented. And neither of the ways is necessarily better than the other, they're simply different from one another, with different strengths and weaknesses. Which type of storytelling do you prefer? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next time.